Good day and welcome to the Goodman podcast. Today I have a very, very dear friend, Dave Hajdu, all the way from Vietnam. He is an awesome person, and I tell you, I spent a lot of time with him, so I can testify that he's a great learning mindset, great friend, and awesome person overall. He's an EO member as well as how I met him. So, Dave, introduce yourself. Tell us who you are.
Yeah, thanks, Raj. I can't think of a better person to be here talking to as well. I've really enjoyed friendship we've developed over the last year. But yeah, who am I? I think it's interesting when I think about how I define myself. I think in my early days, my life was all about sports and competition, and I grew up in the U.S. and then I got introduced to tech, and so I'm a little bit old, and so I saw the birth of the internet. I saw the Y2K, and we were actually talking about that today, which was kind of weird. But yeah, and so I spent a lot of time from kind of the corporate life at Microsoft to starting my own business. But I think what's defined me over the past 10 years really has been like a dedication to really understanding like companies, company culture, through my entrepreneur group EO, which you're a member of, connecting with entrepreneurs. And then through my last business, Tiny Pulse, we just spent a lot of time like learning how to kind of measure engagement and performance and develop high performing cultures. And so, I've just been blessed to work with some amazing companies and learn from them. Personally, it's really funny because I was just asked a question around this, like what's kind of like my family superpower. And I'm like, well, I guess staying young and single because I never got married. And so I don't know if that's good or bad. Maybe I'm bad at relationships or I'm like, good at the single part. So, but yeah, I still have remained single. And so maybe marriage is around the corner. We'll see.
Sounds fantastic. When people ask me, obviously being married for now almost 12 years, when people ask me about getting married, I just say, if you can delay it, just delay it as much as you possibly can, because once you are in it, it's lifelong, isn't it? So is what I'm going to say. So if you remain single so far, I think you've done really well.
Cool, thank you.
Awesome. So, Dave, I understand that obviously you have done a lot of work in recruitment. You've done a lot of work in hiring the right people. Tell us experience a little bit around that, and what do you think is the next phase of recruitment and career and growth in that area?
Sure. So my experience, my first business in Vietnam, which was 18 years ago now, was actually like project-based outsourcing, in a true third world country. And so hiring was challenging, at best, and everything was challenging. But, we ran that business for about 10 years. And then the second part of my business, Tiny Pulse, we created our own product, and the product was meant to help people hire, retain, grow talent, right? And so I think recruitment, it's just the single most important thing people do. And I've heard, I was reading some stories around Google, how Google works, that book, Work Rules. It was interesting that, Larry Page and that he literally was involved with like all these really early interviews. And so I think they said like up to 10,000 employees, they reviewed every single one, right, in a weekly recruiting meeting, which was how important that they took it, right, which was phenomenal. So I think that to me, it's the single most important thing, and it's also extremely hard. It's really hard to do. So I think that the kind of the advent of like these new tools and technologies, and I know we're going to talk a lot about AI today, but it's amazing how much that can help solve some of these problems, right? And so I had the pleasure of like meeting Josh Person and some people from Deloitte. And Deloitte is a company that, is a consulting firm. People is their product, and they care deeply about it, and they care deeply about growth. But yet when they published their study on performance evaluation, what they said was 60% of the people didn't think it's fair. There's rater bias, there's recruiter bias, there's a recency bias, there's all these things, and all that applies into recruiting as well. Like it's a challenging thing. So I think it's a tough discipline, but one as entrepreneurs, we really have to dig into and do well.
That's amazing. And obviously you talked about you use the magic towards AI in them. Obviously, as you might know, I'm as I'm sure you know, I'm all about the AI. So
Mm-hmm.
tell me a little bit about the evolution of AI in shaping team dynamics. I mean, performance in not only recruitment, but maybe even in recruitment in Vietnam, for example, because even though you're based there and you hire a lot of people there.
Yeah, sure. So I guess first, if I just think about kind of how it's helping. When I ran Tiny Pulse, we were looking for employee feedback and inputs, right? So whether that employee feedback was a survey that helped us measure engagement, whether it was a one-on-one form that helped the manager do better, whether it was a performance pulse, or in recruitment. And so in recruitment, we tried to build a product that we were actually going to call Talent. But one of the most difficult things is setting up everything, right? So if you're trying to set up something and have it be repeatable and measurable and then go back, I mean, it just didn't work very well. It was really, really hard. And so, we built this whole thing. And then as we started like beta testing it, these recruiters were like, holy cow, this is taking me exponentially more time. Where now with AI, I mean, what's fascinating, so just to, like really quickly, I talked to my recruiter, hey, we're going to try to, you can do 5 people a month. We're going to try to do 15, right? And she's like, oh, how can I do that? I'm like, okay, well, what takes you the most time? Scanning resumes. Okay, let's see what your resume summary looks like, and let's build a prompt for you, and let's basically input all those resumes into ChatGPT and let it do it for you, right? And so it'll scan it, it'll produce her summary for her in exactly the way that she wants it done, and it'll give her a recommendation, right? And so it helps her like quickly narrow down, and that saves per role, I don't know, 15 hours of her time, right? And so she shaves that all the way down, and there's just like numerous other steps in the process that it can be super valuable.
That's amazing. Obviously, AI does a great job at summarizing, finding trends in the CVs. So I can see why this would work really well. Dave, what are your thoughts on onboarding and performance evaluation? Do you feel like AI can help there as well, or this is more in the initial process where you're looking to find the candidates?
Yeah, so I have to admit, we haven't started applying it on the performance side. So maybe I won't try to speak to that as much. I believe so if I kind of go back to this Deloitte study, you have like 3 key problems, right? You have like rater bias. And so you and I, well, you've got a master's degree, I don't. So like if we're trying to rate somebody in intelligence, we might have a very different perspective. Your master's is in AI, my undergrad's in business, so like the way I rate a person, is coming from a different lens as you. So even if we have like guidelines and all these things, it's really hard to be fair, right? So there's rater bias. Then there's recency bias. So if I'm trying to measure performance of this person, well, naturally, the first thing I think about is like what happened yesterday, right? Like it's really hard for me to go back and do all that. And even if I do, like my memory of what happened is not necessarily what happened, right? So that's very difficult. And the other thing is like siloed data. So there's just stuff that's in different places. And so when it comes to doing performance reviews, as much as I try really, really hard to do it well, it's probably hard for me to be very fair, right? And this is why in the Deloitte study, as much as they try to be fair, like over 60% every single time said the reviews are not fair, right? And so when I think about AI, it's an unbiased opinion. It's capable of scanning data in a fair way. It's capable of summarizing, as we just said, in a fair way. And so if a company is able to do what we were trying to do at Tiny Pulse, which is like solve the siloed data problem and get it into one place, well, then the analysis of it, I think becomes fairer. And what I think will become super interesting is I was just having a discussion with somebody about the value of panel interviews. Well, what if AI is one of the panelists, right? And you can actually compare, how the AI rates something versus how the rater did, right? And I think that really helps the rater too with self-reflection and say, oh my gosh, I missed that. I forgot that they did that. And I think that those are the aha moments that are going to happen in performance. And I'm seeing similar stuff because in interview, which we are using it exclusively now, like very heavily, in the interview, the same kind of things happen, right? I have a rater bias when I'm interviewing somebody. And so we always do panel interviews, kind of again, following Google process on this because you want multiple opinions. And then the third one is ChatGPT, right? Because we can record the interview, we can then take the transcript of the interview, and we can plug it in. And I mean, it shocks me. I used to think I was a good note taker, and I'm like, man, I missed that. I didn't realize that, like, he said it that way, or I didn't realize that he didn't give enough detail on that for me to even judge it. And it's actually like when you craft your prompt properly and you ask the AI to be critical, it'll give you some really fascinating feedback. And I think that's going to apply the same way when it comes to performance reviews too. And I think that when you have that unbiased opinion, and if you transparently show that, I think that's going to start to help with that problem where employees feel like things aren't fair, right? So that's kind of where I see the evolution, and I'm really excited. I think but I just sold my company, and so now I just started a new one, right? So I'm growing it, and I'm like, I can't wait for the first performance review so we can test this stuff out, right? It'd be exciting. So
It's phenomenal. I think what I love is that you've really grabbed the bull by the horn, so to speak, and really embraced AI the way you have. One thing I heard you say as you were talking about different applications and the Deloitte's report was that there's a partnership between AI and human beings. Why do you feel that's important, and do you think that's going to change in the future?
yeah, I mean, this is something I learned from you in one of your workshops too before, is that there's there's no immediate path to AI being emotional. There's no immediate path to AI even deciding. Like, I'll give you an example. If I use interview evaluation and I just ask ChatGPT to look at this transcript and evaluate against a job description, it's going to do it in a fairly benign fashion, right? But if I actually say, hey, I want you to go apply this kind of interviewing framework and I want you to be critical, you can actually get different results on it, right? And so if you don't have the human actually guiding that, like, what do you actually want, and how do you actually create the request, you're not going to be successful right now. And I'm not sure how long it's going to take till we actually reach that phase, but I think there's a long way to go. And so I really do feel like it's a partnership. And, I realized I didn't really answer this question about like the Vietnam part, but one thing I love about Vietnam is that the people here are very entrepreneurial. They're very tech curious. They're very ambitious. And so I had a dinner with a friend of mine, and we had helped him establish a company here about 7 years ago, and all but one person still working for him. And so he came to visit, and then we brought them to the dinner table, and we were all talking. And he now has a huge company I'm not going to talk about the country, but in a different country. And we were talking about AI a little bit, and then I was like, oh, I'm so excited because the culture here really embraces it. And he was like, really? He's like, in the couple of different countries where I hire, they're more apprehensive. And I looked at the team and I'm like, is anybody here like apprehensive? They're just like, the like astonishment on their faces because they are so excited about using it. And as soon as they learn it and as soon as they get a little bit better at their job, it's just like this light bulb goes off, and like, and I know that's going to happen all around the world. Right? What I love about Vietnam is they're kind of trailblazing on this. They were, a lot of people don't know, but Vietnam and the crypto blockchain space, was like one of the fastest growing markets in the world. And they actually created the largest revenue generating app of any crypto app in the world. So not Ethereum, none of that stuff. So it was actually a game called Axie Infinity that was built down the hall from where my office was. So it's cool. I think it's a real tech curious society. And I think that's going to bode very well in terms of their like rapid adoption of AI to do their jobs better.
That's really good to hear, and bizarre because not bizarre, but like encouraging actually. That recently I was in Hong Kong, just like a couple of days back. I tried to use ChatGPT in Hong Kong, and it wouldn't work on the landline network. So I had to use my mobile network and use a VPN to make it work.
Hmm.
As a recruitment executive, as somebody who's done this for many years, as you're integrating AI into your workforce and your processes as well, what do you believe is the future of AI for for not only recruitment, but also, do you think this is going to become a fundamental part which we have to inculcate in society? Do you feel that that's going to be important for us? And these bans, which some tools are seeing at the moment, do you think that's fair, or do you think that is just temporary? How do you see it as a I guess a lot of questions there. Pick one which you think is more appropriate.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with the last one, which is, the bans. I think, I don't know, I've seen this with every single technology the last 30 years, starting with the internet. The internet was banned in so many countries initially, and it's still, to some extent, Google's banned in places. But at the end of the day, you can't you can't really ban technology, right? And so a lot of places are banning it. And actually, interesting enough, I know a company in Hong Kong that what they're trying to do is like kind of localize the flavor of that stuff, right? So that it can become widespread and more acceptable and this kind of thing. But I mean, I see it as really simple. Either you're going to learn how to use technology to be better at your job, or you're not. That's it, right? And the technology right now, AI is probably the most predominant one. You need to be, and if you don't, you're done. You can't compete, right? And so so my new business, we help people like build we call them AI empowered teams, right? In our culture, basically, we have a 10% mandated time that you need to be investing in learning how to actually use tools and then share it back. So it's fascinating, like the applications I'm tech, but now we do any role. So social media to virtual assistants. And we only have one rule in the company. Like, I don't believe in rules. Right? The only rule is you must write perfect English always, no exceptions, right? And so what do? They run it to ChatGPT, and then what's the next thing that they do, right? We request that you ask ChatGPT to correct your work and tell you why, right? And so every single time they produce any kind of communication, they're learning English, right? And they're learning English in a practical application. And I'm just watching it accelerate. And it's beautiful, it's really beautiful. And so, but if you look at like, a Vietnamese person who doesn't have that access, their English is going like this, right? Where these guys are going like this. And so if you want an English speaking job, who's going to win, right? It's just, and I just think that's an analogy to what's going to happen over the next 10 years. It's like either you embrace tech and you learn to use it in your job and your learning, or you don't. That's it.
That's impressive, and I love that you are thinking about these things and having simple rules, not a whole like list of like of handbook on rules, but just say one single simple rule to have perfect English. And I can see how AI can help with that. Just building on that, obviously, we talked about Vietnam, and people exploring to build or create a tech team, or just a team in Vietnam. You talked about some of the opportunities in hiring people. Are there any challenges there as well, and how have you mitigated them with your company, or based on your skills and what you've done before?
Yeah, definitely. And so I have two similar but very different experiences. So one is staffing, where we're literally hiring people for clients, and then the other was building our own product. So we're literally like hiring people for ourselves, and we had a subsidiary here. And so I think the I think the interesting thing about people and challenges is uh, I spent 10 years in measuring employee engagement, and people always like want to know, what's the holy grail to getting more people engaged? Well, there's actually one really simple thing, which is, have you ever met anybody who's bad at their job who's happy, right, or engaged? And the answer is a clear no, right? Because if I'm failing, even if I'm not getting reamed and I'm like a reluctant stayer, I'm not happy, right? And so in business, and this as well as all these entrepreneurs out there, but it's really hard to do. If I set clear expectations and I inspect what I expect, right, then I can actually give feedback, which is the next really hard part, right? Like, how do I kind of use radical candor and challenge people, right, and build trust? So if I just think about Vietnam, I think that the very first thing, and this applies, I think, a lot in Asia, especially if you're like a Westerner coming here, which is like, how do you establish the trust first? Like one of my favorite quotes from a guy named Malik Muhammad is that, he said, connection is the currency that allows you to challenge, right? So if I want to go challenge like a Vietnamese team member and don't want them to shell up and like don't tell me anything, well, they have to trust me, right? I got to connect with them. So I need to learn how to do that. And culturally, because we move into this world where global talent strategies are critical to every business, that's one of the first things you're going to learn is like, what's the difference in how culture, like, because we're culturally different, period. So how do I connect with you, right? And how do I learn that? And I think that's a challenge no matter where you go. Vietnam in particular, they're very family based. They're very they're proud, so it's important for them to be able to say, I work at this company and they're doing something good. So like understanding that. I don't ever cared about titles and things like that. I'm an American that came from Microsoft and this flat structure. That's not how things work out here, right? And so, I think that so the biggest challenge for anybody is understanding like what are your differences and how do you first build that connection, and then once you have that currency, next, how do you have those challenging conversations? Because sometimes that's not easy too, right? It's not the same way I might do it in the U.S., right? Because now I got to deal with the pride thing, and I got to deal with the fact that they respect elders and authority in a different way, and so it's hard for me to get them to, okay, here you could just tell me things, right? And so, yeah, I think when you start to solve those things and you start to build those connections, the rest of it starts to fall in play. But I'll just say it's not easy anywhere, and then when you try to go global, it becomes an extra step in understanding.
That's amazing. I love the idea of connections and culture, the nuances. As they say, connections and culture can eat strategy for breakfast. So I can
Mhm.
see how that's so true for Vietnam. And obviously, you cracked this over the years. You've been there in Vietnam so long. You understand both the the Western mindset, lack of a better word, and the Vietnamese and the Eastern mindset as well. Do you feel in that cultural part and connection bit, AI can also be helpful in that? Are you seeing that's helping your company and your customers, for example, as well?
Yeah, so I think that the very actually what's interesting is so I have a new client that I'm working with, and they design plates, and they're very successful like designing plates for the Middle Eastern market, and they're successful in Asia, and they want to penetrate the U.S. market, right? And so now they want to use and so Vietnam's got a great artist community. So like, yeah, I was there and so the paintings, and I want to tap into that, and I want to tap into that creativity. Well, okay, cool. So what do you really try to do? Okay, holidays in the US are the best opportunity, right? Where the plate industry explodes because people like to buy Halloween or Christmas plates or maybe even like Valentine's or something. And so okay, now you want like these artists coming out of Vietnam to understand American holiday culture and be able to creatively design. Good luck, right? So what ends up happening, and what you see this a lot, and he even told me that like China is excellent at copying, right? So they'll find it, they'll just literally copy it, but that's not really what he wants. And so I'm like, really hoping that we close this deal and do this because I think it's an incredible AI opportunity, right? Which is like teaching them how to research and teaching them how to like, get an understanding of the why behind certain things, and so that will then help them kind of structure what they're trying to do from a painting perspective. So if it's kind of like, oh, Santa's this jolly character that, gives kids gifts and, it's fun. Okay, well, cool. I want to design a children's plate of like, Santa delivering a gift to this child. Okay, cool, right? But they might have never understood that before because here, Christmas is like one of the biggest party holidays in Vietnam. So they think of it differently, right? Like it's like pictures and shopping, but it's not gift giving and family and sharing, So, but yeah, AI can really help people kind of dive into the research of culture. And so, that's one way an artist might do it. I mean, I would assume that like, in any research topic, AI is great. Like you introduced me to Perplexity by AI. And so Perplexity, for a search tool, it just gives you an answer, along with the resources. And it's phenomenal. I mean, it's like, I remember you saying, yeah, this is like my number two tool. I'm like, gosh, sometimes it's my number one tool in the course of the day, right? Because just like, I got a question, I just ask it and it gives me an answer, right? It's pretty cool. And then, yeah, so if I'm researching like how to kind of like break down something culturally, there's a couple different tools that are very valuable for that.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's really interesting. I love the way you explain that, Dave, and what you're doing. Also, you explain your why, and your customers' why as well, which is really interesting as well. The one thing I'm going to dive a little bit deeper now is the how, and how do you see the evolution of the AI tech used in recruitment and global talent experiences. I heard you talk about Perplexity and ChatGPT. What else are you currently using, for example, and what do you see the future might look like? Let me kind of bring in the context about the open source tech at the moment. Llama 3 has been released. At some point,
Mm-hmm.
it was better than ChatGPT 4 Turbo. At some point, some people say, no, it's not. It's to be hosted. What's your point of view on that, Dave, and where do you see this going in the future?
Yeah, I think that like when you look at the models themselves, at the end of the day, they're built on data, right? And so then the different people have different sets of data that they're stronger in. Well, Microsoft with their acquisition of LinkedIn and the fact that they just own enterprise has access to all this kind of business data. And they've got Bing, but Bing is like a second class citizen to Google and the data that they have. And so if you're looking at like, data around like specific searches and actions, but then when you get into like behavior, nobody can touch Facebook, right? Now, I don't know the legalities of like how they're looking at using people's data in these models and this kind of thing. But like I've read from a variety of experts that is potentially one that might quote unquote win, at least from like a consumer side, because they already know like everything I like and everything I comment on and like and so them like kind of understanding so that AI's ability to understand my personality is exponentially better than the Microsoft side, which might have a really good idea on like a work perspective, right? And so I think that there's probably going to be like flavors of models that evolve, and some might be better than others. Now, me personally, right now, I just don't. It's such a big topic, and like just understanding like how to prompts and like how to be good at a specific thing it's not enough work as it is. And so like, my engineer, like he's using Copilot and some other stuff. I'm like, yeah, okay, come back and share with me later. Like on my social media, they're using some repurpose tools and this kind of thing. Repurpose is even the name of the tool. But so that it literally helps your AI writing, go repurpose and so but for me, like I'm really just focused on like, okay, how do I get better at using ChatGPT period, right? For the core things that I'm doing right now, the number one thing I care about is recruiting. We're hiring like 7 positions with one recruiter, and we've got to get fast, right? And so we're actually in the process of building our own little tool so that allows you to just point to a folder of resumes, and then it'll just call it and then import them one by one, and then create the scans and automate that whole process, right? And so I think there's more than enough for me as a solo entrepreneur too, right? A small company to just stay very focused and narrow. But in the meantime, I'm reading, so I'm really curious. Okay, how's Llama going to evolve? And if it looks like it's getting this much better, then potentially you move over because I assume you'll still apply the same principles around prompt frameworks and this type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think these large language models, or these models which like Gemini, ChatGPT, Llama, they're all interreplaceable. It's input, output, black box, right? So I guess it doesn't matter really which one you use. But I'm glad to hear that you're thinking about more than just ChatGPT as well. You're thinking about the API usage, for example, and bringing the automation in as well. That's really inspiring, Dave. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah,
Yeah.
give us the insight into what you're working on right now.
Yeah, so yeah, it's exciting. It's really exciting. In fact, it's really funny because, I think I have a 2-year non-compete with Tiny Pulse or something, but like even if I don't actually fully productize it as a business, in my mind I'm like, oh my God, I would love to build that from the ground up, like AI first, being able to like get the inputs from all these different things, and then from there analyze and then have like this end-to-end view of an employee's life cycle. I mean, gosh, I could just see our original vision like come to life in like 3 months instead of 10 years. So yeah, it's exciting.
That's awesome. I think clearly you have that learner's mindset, the curiosity to try different things and implement them, which is what is awesome and a common thread. And obviously that comes from EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, is how we met each other.
Mm.
So Dave, tell us a little bit about your EO journey, and if it's helped you or it's impacted your business, your personal life, or maybe family life, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I can say this with conviction that EO has completely changed the course of my life, and so just to give you a little bit of my EO background. So my partner joined what they call Accelerator, and then once we qualified for EO, because I was already in Asia, we didn't have the program in Vietnam. So once we qualified for EO, all my buddies back home in Seattle are already members now. They're bringing me to events as the wife every now and then. And so I got this flavor of it. And so I decided to join, but I joined in the Philippines because there was no Vietnam chapter. And then what happens in EO is they have this word we call voluntold. You think you're volunteering for something, but next thing you know, you're told something else. And it always starts with this really like inconspicuous phrase like, hey, can you help me with this? And so my buddy, Mark Padilla, was like, hey, we're the sister chapter trying to start Vietnam. Can you help me with this event? And the next thing I know, I look up on the screen and it's like David Hajdu, champion of EO Vietnam. And I'm like, what the hell? So that was my first experience with that. And so next thing you know, I'm like, kind of, okay, well, shoot, I got to like actually go and try to figure out how to build a chapter from zero, right? Which is really, really challenging. Actually, really, really challenging. And so I think, if I think about what EO's done for me, from that experience, I became a president, I became a learning chair, I was able to like learn how to do events. Actually, this is a golf. Sure, I did a golf. I don't even golf, but like I got voluntold again because they wanted to do a golf event in Vietnam. And so, yeah, but I'm pretty good at coordinating events. So I'm like, cool, and then I learned how golf tournaments run and how they award them, so really cool. So my journey, I went from like founding the chapter to like doing different board positions, and then now I'm taking a regional role, so area director. Um, but how it's changed my life. I mean, personally, like my background's like nightclub, bars, like all these things, like nightlife. But you start meeting all these people that have these really good habits, and you start to find that they start in the morning. And I went to a conference around that leadership academy, and they got me getting up at 6 a.m. and journaling and exercising. And 6 years later, I still do it, and that like eventually has changed to where I actually go to bed at night now and I, get up early and I'm pretty productive for it and I'm very intentional. And so on a personal level, I think it's really helped me kind of like focus. Um, I never had a personal vision before. My personal vision is to empower growth and belonging, which really has helped me shape this business that I'm doing now. So yeah, personally, it really changed me. Professionally, like everything I do in business, I learned in EO. So University of Washington Business School, bless its soul, but the only thing I really took away was like negotiations class, and other than that, I can't remember anything I studied. But EO, we have like different systems like enterprise EOS, enterprise operating system, or Rockefeller habits, a way that you organize your strategy and your tactical execution. So from that to like the way I negotiate to the way I coach to literally every single thing that we do is because of something I learned in EO. Even like AI is literally was inspired by you. The first time I went to one of your workshops, right? So that AI first mindset is, I use that terminology all the time now with myself, with my team. And so, that's all EO. And I think the final piece is just friendships. Like somebody asked me, like, God, over 10 years, have you spent over $100,000 in EO? I'm like, probably, and they were like, was it worth it? I'm like, I don't know, you're my friend now. I wouldn't know you if it wasn't for EO. And so when I think about like my circle of friends and they say that, you're an average of the 5 people you're closest to. And so, I'm pretty proud that a lot of the people close to me are EO folks, right? Because they're humble, they're dedicated to learning, they're successful enough that they have time to invest in these kind of things and care about kind of a circle of life, personal, family, professional. And so, yeah, it's a great place for all those reasons.
Wow, what a way to end a dynamic podcast there, Dave. Thank you so much for coming today. I learned a lot from you. Your insight into recruitment, talent, AI, how you incorporate AI into something which is meant to be very historic or sort of ancient in its practice, is inspirational, and what you're doing in Vietnam is phenomenal. So thank you, Dave, for sharing, and I look forward to seeing you in person very soon. And yeah, thank you once again.
Yeah, thank you, Raj.